Good morning. Welcome back. Had a really good time reading a lot of the group examples from your last assignment, especially because, I can go ahead and describe it and I can tell you, students in the past, what they've said. But reading your examples, and a lot of them were really, really good, especially because, unfortunately, in a lot of these cases, when it comes to the family, the situations you have to talk about, you just can't get together for 15 minutes and have a conclusion. It just doesn't work like that. Okay? And sometimes it does take several meetings. It could take months or even up to a year or more of meetings before you come to, you reach a goal or you accomplish a task or you solve a solution, come up with a solution to a problem. And I was not surprised that so many of you had situations like that, especially those who even said, and I know I got this on more than one occasion, where it is still unresolved, okay? Whatever it was you were discussing in that group. And that's why time is always a significant part. You just can't, show up at a meeting, lay out what needs to be done, and expect in 15 minutes you're going to have something done. It doesn't always work like that. Okay? It's simply there are situations where you have to give yourself the proper amount of time. Now, one of the other things you did, some of you talked about, is that sometimes, animosities would grow in, there would be arguing, and a lot of times what ends up happening is people end up letting their emotions get involved or something that happened in the past. There's a lot of different things that can go into this. So what I want to talk to you about today is about you as the individual group participant, is ensuring that before you show up for that group meeting, you are the most effective group participant that you can be. Okay? Now, one of the things you can begin with is what I call my 4 individual preps. Okay? These are preparations that you can make long before you even get to that meeting to ensure that once you start that group meeting, you are the most effective group participant possible. For example, make sure before you start, you are as knowledgeable as you can be about what's to be discussed. Okay? Let's say, for example, your boss sends you an email on Wednesday and says, starting Monday morning, 8 a.m., you and 4 other people are going to meet in the conference room and come up with a new sales pitch for our product. Well, more than likely, if I'm going to look for you on Saturday or Sunday, you're probably going to be in front of a computer, gathering data, looking up information, doing research, so that when you walk in Monday morning, you are going to be one of the most knowledgeable, if not the most knowledgeable person in that group, coming up with several solution suggestions. So you want to make sure you know what it is you're going to be discussing. Now, with that said, also make sure you go in open-minded. Always know that someone else just might have a better idea than yours. Now, it's not easy sometimes, because people really think sometimes that when it comes to a situation they'll be discussing in a group, there might be 5, 6 other people in that group, but they feel, I know it better than anybody else. I'm an expert on this. Well, no, not always. Not always. You'll be surprised who you are in that group with, and who, maybe someone you don't know, just might have a better suggestion than yours. Prejudice, keep it out. Now, this is something I was referring to before about the animosities and stuff. People, when they think of prejudice, is making a prejudgment about someone based on the color of their skin or their religious beliefs or their backgrounds. But that's not what I'm talking about. When I say prejudice, it's a prejudgment you have about someone, especially someone you work with. Let's say, for example, someone you work with kind of went around your back and went to the boss and told the boss something about you, and they didn't come to you first. And the boss says, hey, I heard you did this. And then you find out it was that person who did it. Well, you know it's them, and now you never speak to them. Okay? Well, now it's 5 years later. And now you find out you and that person who went around your back are now going to be on this 6-person committee who's got to come up with this new solution to a problem. So now you sit down, you meet in your group, that other person comes up with an idea, and you quickly say, that's not a good idea. Now, are you saying that because you thought it out and don't think it's a workable or doable idea? No. You shot down the idea because you remember what that person did to you 5 years ago, and you're never going to forget. That's what I mean by prejudice. Now, if you don't think that's true, talk to your parents who have had a job for like 15, 20, 25 years at the same place. There's probably at least one person they work with who they don't speak to, or someone who did something to them 12, 15 years ago. And as a matter of fact, I've heard this before. When my dad worked in the trucking industry, he worked for a trucking company for a long time. And there were animosities between this person and that person who both had to report to him, and this person needed to go to that person, and they would actually go around them, or they'd send somebody else, like a third party. And my dad would get, "Hi, Mike, such and such told such and such to tell you." Okay? Instead of them talking directly to each other. It was just a crazy, crazy situation. Okay? So, if you have that prejudice, and again, this even happens in the classroom. For example, if we were actually meeting face-to-face by this point in the semester, this is like 9 weeks into the semester. So if we're meeting twice a week, there might be somebody in class who just annoys the hell out of you, like the sound of their voice, or they've said something really silly in class, or they always argue with me or something like that, and they argue with me over stupid things during the course of the semester. Now you find out you're in a group with them. Well, make sure before you enter that room where you're going to meet, keep your prejudice outside the room. Because that person who annoys the hell out of you, who for the first 9 weeks of the semester you can't stand, that person just might have the best idea. All right? So keep your prejudice out. And then finally, there's nothing wrong with practicing politeness. Okay? What's that old saying Grandma used to have? You get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. Just practicing politeness. Kill them with kindness. Okay? The best movie to demonstrate group communication that I've ever seen, and it's still used today. I know when I saw it in my group communication class in college, it was already in the 90s, and this movie was a very old movie at that point. It's an old black and white movie. It's called 12 Angry Men. Okay? For those who don't know the movie, a lot of you probably do know it, but for those who don't know, it's from 1957, and it's just a movie about 12 men in a jury room who had just seen a murder trial and now have to come up with a guilty or not guilty verdict. And in the beginning, 11 vote guilty, 1 votes not guilty. And right away you start seeing there's always going to be one of them. And he says, it's not that I'm saying he's not guilty, but I think we should at least talk about it. And he starts to get all this, like, anger and resentment towards him for how dare you vote not guilty when we're all voting guilty. And as they talk more about the trial and they go over the evidence, they realize there's a lot of holes in the evidence. And by the end of the film, all 12 vote not guilty. And the guy who originally voted not guilty, as the discussion moves on, he treats every one of the other members of the jury as he would want to be treated. Okay? Nothing wrong with practice, especially because at the end of the film, which is interesting, which really kind of wraps it all up about group, is as they do come to their not guilty verdict and now they're leaving the courthouse, they're never going to see each other again. None of them will ever see each other again. Okay? So it's always interesting how, people like, my answer's got to be the right one. If it's not, if you disagree with me, you hate me, or you're an idiot or something. No. Nothing wrong with practicing politeness. Now, what also can help determine how you can be as effective as possible is determining what kind of behavior you assert during your group session. And what behaviors can be called are what we call naturally assuming roles. See, everyone always naturally assumes a role in a group. Even if you don't say a gosh darn word, you're still assuming a role, albeit a negative one, but you're still assuming a role. Okay? Now, these roles start on page 253, as noted in your assignment sheet. And some of the positive roles that you naturally assume, for example, are what we call, say, the initiator or contributor, or someone who is an information giver. Okay? A lot of times people will bring information and they'll bring forth something in their suggestion for a solution, and it's really good stuff. Someone who, of course, is an opinion giver. I expect everybody's going to be an opinion giver. But also an opinion seeker, someone who really does seek out what it is that everybody feels in the group. Someone who's an energizer, someone who really puts the group into the right direction. and so on and so forth. These are just some of the many different positive roles that we call group task roles. Now, on page 254, we talk about social and maintenance roles. These are people who keep positive cohesiveness among the group. For example, someone who's a harmonizer. Okay? Make sure that even if we have disagreements, we make sure that we disagree on the idea and we don't make it personal. And harmonizers are really good at nipping that in the bud. Also, someone who's a supporter or encourager. Okay? Telling people, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Because especially, sometimes you'll get somebody who hasn't said a word for like the first half hour of the group. And you finally say to that person, you haven't said anything. What do you think? And typically that person will say, well, I don't want to sound stupid, but do you then go ahead and say, you know what? That is stupid. Don't say anything else. No, of course not. You tell them, no, that's good. Write that one down. Let's keep coming up with those. That's good. That's good. There has never been a negative about being a supporter or encourager in a group. Ever. Okay? So that's another positive social and maintenance role. But unfortunately, as you see on page 255, yes, we have the positive, but we also have the negative, and these are what we call dysfunctional roles. Now, the thing with dysfunctional roles is, like I said, especially in the workplace, okay, you can't, unless you're very, very lucky, you can't pick and choose the people you work with, all right? So when you have a group situation, especially at work, and you have someone who just happens to assume a dysfunctional role, you have to kill them with kindness. You've got to work through that person with the dysfunctional role. For example, one is what we call an aggressor, someone who struggles for status by deflating the status of others and boasts and criticizes, okay? Just kill them with kindness. You just can't walk away, or you just can't quit the group. Especially, for example, I'll give you a great example that some of you, if you haven't gone through this already, will go through this in the future. Is let's say you go ahead and you get either your associate's degree or your bachelor's degree. All right. You then get your entry-level position, your first ever full-time salary job. Okay. This is great. You're finally starting to make real money thanks to your bachelor's degree. So now after a year, you've gone ahead, got into an apartment with somebody, so now you've got a lease that you've got to honor. You start putting down a down payment on a new car, and of course you got to pay the insurance for that car and everything else. And then all of a sudden you go to work, and someone who you don't like at work starts going after you with a dysfunctional role. Well, again, you just can't get up and quit that job. You've got bills to pay. You're locked in. You got another 7 months on your lease on your apartment. You can't just break it. Okay? So what you have to do is at that group meeting is work through, exhaust all avenues of kindness when working with someone or through someone who exerts a dysfunctional role. Because also you'll have someone who's a blocker. This is someone who just interferes with the progress and just shoots down everything without ever even giving you a reason. All right? Exhaust all avenues of kindness whenever working with a dysfunctional role. All right, well, that goes ahead and sets up your group paper. I have to tell you, this is the most frustrating. I know you might think it's the speeches, but for me, this is the most frustrating part of this course online, because I really like setting you guys up in groups of 5 or 6 and having you meet in different parts of the campus and going ahead and having this discussion face-to-face. And I could try to do it with the WebEx, as each of you have your own little WebEx meetings, but again, we're asynchronous. Everybody's got different schedules, and even 6 people, for them to find an hour and a half where they can all spend together, and that's a large period of time, it's just not going to happen. So you have your assignment sheet. Your group paper, as you know, is worth up to 100 points, and it is due by Monday at 8 p.m. All right? Good luck, you guys, and we'll see you on Tuesday morning.